The rain tapped against the glass windows of Mama Kemi's diner, as the smell of fried chicken and fresh bread filled the small room where families laughed and couples shared meals. But in the far corner sat a woman who looked out of place because her silk dress and shining diamond earrings did not match the cracked leather booth. She sat in alone with a small chocolate cake in front of her and a single candle flickering in the dim light. Her name was Adanna, a Nigerian billionaire who had built her empire from nothing by the age of 30, yet tonight on her birthday, she sat without friends, without family, and without a single voice to say happy birthday to her as she held the fork with trembling fingers and tried to swallow a piece of cake that tasted like ash in her mouth. She thought of all the birthdays she had spent surrounded by employees or fake friends who only cared about her money but never about her heart, and she felt tears burning at the back of her eyes. But she forced them away because she had taught herself long ago that strong women did not cry in public. Still, the loneliness pressed against her chest like a heavy stone, and the empty seat across from her seemed to whisper that wealth meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. Then suddenly she felt a gentle touch on her shoulder and a soft voice close to her ear that made her freeze. The young waitress Destiny Ademi, only 22 years old, with bright brown eyes and long braids, leaned in close enough that Adanna could smell the faint scent of coconut oil in her hair, and she whispered quickly, "Keep eating and act normal. Do not look at the table next to you. Your life depends on it." The words sliced through Adanna's mind like a knife, and her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the whole diner could hear it. What could possibly be happening in this quiet little diner that would make her life depend on a warning from a stranger? She wanted to turn her head, but Destiny's hand pressed lightly on her shoulder, and she shook her head with quiet strength. "Trust me," she whispered again, "just trust me." And then she straightened and walked away, carrying her tray as if nothing unusual had been said. Adanna sat frozen, the candle still flickering, the cake untouched, and the fear growing inside her chest. She had been through boardroom battles, court cases, and betrayals, but never had she felt so helpless as she did in that moment when a young student waitress told her not to look because danger was sitting just a few feet away. She lifted the fork slowly to her mouth, trying to act normal, just as she had been told, but her blue-painted nails shook against the silver, and she whispered under her breath, "Mama, protect me," as she swallowed a bite that tasted like fear. Adanna tried to steady her breathing as she pushed the fork into the soft chocolate cake, pretending to enjoy every bite, though her throat felt tight with fear. She wanted to run, she wanted to shout, she wanted to call her driver waiting outside, but something in Destiny's voice told her that panic would only make things worse. She let her eyes wander for just a second to the reflection in the glass window across from her, and that was when she saw them, 3 men sitting at the corner table, pretending to scroll through their phones, but every so often their eyes lifted toward her with the sharpness of hunters watching prey. Her stomach dropped. She recognized the look, not the faces, but the look of people who had already chosen her as their target. They were dressed in plain clothes, but one man's jacket bulged at the side as if something heavy hid inside, and another tapped his fingers against the table in a rhythm that spoke of impatience. She turned back quickly before they noticed her glance and forced herself to cut another piece of cake. The sweetness coated her tongue but felt like poison. She wanted to believe she was safe after all. She was Adanna Okafor, billionaire businesswoman and one of the most powerful women in Lagos, but here in this little diner, her money, her fame, and her power could not save her. She was just a woman alone with a candle on her birthday, and 3 strangers planning something terrible. Destiny moved gracefully between tables, refilling cups of coffee, carrying trays of hot food, and smiling at customers. But every time she passed Adanna's table, her eyes flicked toward her with a message that words could not say. "Hold on, trust me. I will not let them hurt you." Adanna's chest tightened because she had not trusted anyone in a very long time. Her life had been filled with men who wanted her money, women who envied her success, and business partners who betrayed her for profit. But now she had to place her life in the hands of a 22-year-old waitress who was working part-time to pay for school. The thought should have frightened her, but instead she felt a spark of something she had not felt in years: hope. Destiny's courage was stronger than the fear in the room. One of the men at the corner laughed suddenly, a harsh laugh that made Adanna's skin crawl. She heard him mutter, "She is alone. This will be easy." Another leaned closer and said, "Not yet, wait till she leaves for the car." The third man kept his hand inside his jacket and nodded slowly. Adanna's heart raced. She wanted to pick up her phone and call the police, but she knew that one wrong move could make them act faster. She gripped her purse tighter under the table, her diamond ring cutting into her palm as she whispered another prayer. "Mama, I wish you were here." The candle flickered again, as if answering her cry. Destiny suddenly appeared at her side with a fresh pot of tea, though Adanna had not ordered it. She poured gently and whispered between her smile, "When I tell you, run straight through that door behind me to the kitchen. Do not stop, do not go to your car. I will take care of the rest." Adanna looked into her warm brown eyes, and for the first time in years, she felt that someone truly cared about her as a person, not as a billionaire, and not as a headline. Her throat ached with emotion, but she nodded quietly and lifted the cup of tea to her lips, acting as though all was normal, even while danger sat breathing just a few feet away. Adanna's hands trembled slightly as she set down the teacup, her pulse thudding in her ears while the chatter of the diner seemed to fade into background noise. She could hear only the scraping of chairs as one of the men at the corner table pushed his seat back and stood up, stretching his arms as if to appear casual, but his eyes never left her. The other two men leaned close, whispering quickly and nodding in his direction. Adanna's breath caught as he began walking toward the restroom, which stood only a few steps from her booth. Every instinct told her to run, but Destiny was suddenly there, blocking his path with her bright smile and a tray of steaming soup bowls. "Excuse me, sir, the restroom is under repair. You might want to try the gas station next door." Her voice was polite, her tone calm, but her eyes shone with quiet steel. The man stopped, his face twisting with suspicion. He leaned closer to her and hissed, "Little girl, mind your own business or you will regret it." Adanna's stomach knotted. She wanted to scream for Destiny to back away, but Destiny only lifted her chin slightly and said in a steady voice, "I am just doing my job, sir. Please return to your table." His lips curled into a smile that made Adanna's skin crawl, and he muttered, "We will finish this soon," before turning back to his seat. Adanna exhaled shakily, clutching the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. Destiny placed the tray on the counter, then came to her booth again, pretending to wipe crumbs. She whispered, "Do not move, stay calm. They are losing patience, but help will come." Adanna forced herself to nod, though her body screamed to run, her mind filled with memories of all the sacrifices she had made to build her empire, the late nights, the betrayals, the loneliness. Yet none of that mattered if her life ended here in a small diner at the hands of three criminals. She closed her eyes, briefly whispering, "God, if this is my last night, let me be brave." But then she opened them and saw Destiny standing tall, her young face glowing with determination. And Adanna realized that maybe this was not the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something she had never known before: trust, not in wealth, not in power, but in the goodness of another human being. The men at the corner shifted again, one of them slamming his cup down loudly, startling other customers. Destiny took a deep breath, then walked to the counter where the old manager, Mama Kemi, stood, confused by the tension. Destiny leaned close, explaining in hurried words. Adanna could not hear, but Mama Kemi's eyes widened and she quickly reached for the phone. Destiny returned to Adanna's side with a basket of bread, smiling as though nothing was wrong. She placed it on the table and whispered softly, "I sent Mama Kemi to call the police now. We just need time. Eat slowly. Do not give them any sign." Adanna picked up a piece of bread, though her hands trembled so badly it nearly broke apart. She chewed, forcing herself to stay calm. The three men whispered harshly, one of them glancing at the clock as if counting the seconds. The air grew heavier with every breath. Adanna felt as if the candle flame on her cake was the only light keeping her alive, and she prayed desperately that it would not go out. Destiny hovered close, her presence like a shield between Adanna and the shadows that threatened her life. Her courage burned brighter than fear, and in that moment, Adanna understood that sometimes angels came not with wings but with aprons, trays, and a whisper that saved a life. Adanna's pulse raced as the minutes dragged like hours. The candle on her cake burned lower, dripping wax onto the small plate, while her fear grew heavier inside her chest. The men at the corner table whispered again, this time louder. One of them slammed his fist softly against the wood and said, "She is leaving soon. We cannot wait much longer." Another checked his phone, then slipped it back into his pocket with a sharp glance around the room. Adanna's throat went dry. She wanted to stand and shout, but Destiny's words held her still. "Keep eating. Act normal. Trust me." She pushed another bite of cake into her mouth, though it tasted like sand. Her blue silk dress clung to her back, damp with sweat. The sound of footsteps suddenly echoed as the tallest of the three men rose again, this time walking not toward the restroom, but directly toward the door that led outside. He paused right beside Adanna's booth, pretending to tie his shoe, but his eyes cut toward her purse, glimmering with gold trim. She froze, clutching it tighter under the table. Destiny appeared instantly, carrying a tray of dirty dishes and nearly colliding with him. "Oh, excuse me, sir," she said with a bright smile, her voice sweet as sugar. He grunted, moving aside, but not before muttering low, enough for only them to hear, "You cannot hide her forever, little girl." Destiny's heart hammered, but she did not let fear show. She walked to the counter, set down the tray, then returned to Adanna's table with calm steps. She leaned close, pretending to ask if she needed anything else, but whispered, "The police are close, just a little longer." Adanna wanted to believe her, but the men were restless. One of them now stood blocking the exit, another tapping his hand against his jacket with a cold expression. Families inside the diner began to notice the tension, their laughter fading into uneasy silence. Mama Kemi peeked from the kitchen door, holding the phone, her lips moving in silent prayer. Destiny straightened her back and walked boldly to the men's table, pouring water into their glasses. Though they had not asked, she smiled wide as she said, "Thank you for dining with us tonight. We hope everything is to your satisfaction." The men glared, their eyes sharp like knives. One sneered, "Satisfaction will come when we get what we want." Destiny felt her skin crawl, but she kept smiling because she knew fear would only feed them. Adanna gripped her fork so tightly it dug into her palm, her mind flashing through her mother's words from years ago. "True wealth is not in money. It is in courage and kindness." She whispered them under her breath, steadying herself. The tallest man stepped closer to Adanna's booth again, this time lowering his voice, "Get ready to leave, Miss Rich Lady. We are taking a walk outside." Adanna's heart stopped, but before she could respond, Destiny slipped between them, holding a plate of steaming food for another table, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "Oh, ma'am, here is your order. Sorry for the wait." She placed it quickly, then leaned closer to Adanna, whispering, "Just 10 more seconds. Hold on." Adanna's eyes blurred with tears as she nodded, clutching her purse like a lifeline. The candle flame shook wildly as if sensing the storm about to break. Destiny's own hands shook, but her spirit stood strong. She turned to face the men, her young frame small against their broad shoulders, yet her courage made her look taller than them all. Just then faint sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every heartbeat. The men stiffened their heads, snapping toward the sound. Adanna exhaled in shaky relief. Her prayer answered. The police were almost there. The sirens outside grew louder, but they also made the three men more desperate, because they knew their time was running out. One of them stood so quickly, his chair crashed to the floor, making children in the diner cry and couples gasp in fear. The tallest one pulled his jacket aside, just enough for Adanna to see the outline of a gun tucked at his waist. Her whole body went cold. Her fork slipped from her hand, clattering against the plate, but Destiny moved fast, stepping in front of her booth as though her small frame could be a wall between a gun and a billionaire. "Sit down, sir." Her voice rang out louder than she expected, her brown eyes steady with fire, but the man sneered, "Shut up, little girl. This is none of your business." He reached for Adanna's arm, but Destiny smacked the tray she was holding against his hand, sending silverware flying across the diner. Customers screamed ducking under tables, and Mama Kemi shouted from the counter, "The police are almost here, hold." On Destiny spread her arms wide, blocking Adanna, while her heart pounded so hard she thought it would break through her chest. Adanna stared at her in disbelief, tears filling her eyes because she had never seen such courage for someone else's sake. Destiny leaned slightly back, whispering, "Do not move." Adanna, "Do not scream, just stay down." The second man grabbed a ketchup bottle and threw it against the wall in rage. Red liquid spilling like blood across the tiles, his voice was a growl. "We are not leaving without her." The third one pulled a knife, flashing it, just enough to terrify the room. Adanna's breath came in sharp gasps, her diamond necklace pressing against her skin as though it burned. She thought of all the deals she had made, all the empires she had built. None of it meant anything in this moment, when her life hung by a thread. Yet Destiny still stood tall, her braids swinging as she turned to face them, her voice shaking, yet strong. "Please stop this," she begged you. "Do not have to throw your lives away. You will not win tonight." The man with the gun snarled enough talk. He shoved Destiny back against the booth, her shoulder hitting the wood with a painful thud. Adanna cried out, reaching for her, but Destiny pushed herself up again, refusing to let fear crush her. "No, you will not hurt her," she shouted, her words echoing through the diner. The doors burst open, then police stormed in their vests, glinting under the lights, their voices booming, "Drop your weapons." Hands in the air, chaos exploded. The men tried to run, flipping chairs and knocking over tables, but the officers surrounded them. One fired a shot into the ceiling, warning them to freeze. Destiny dropped to her knees, pulling Adanna down with her, shielding her with her own body as officers tackled the men to the ground, handcuffs snapping tight. The gun skidded across the floor and landed near Adanna's feet, making her flinch. She clutched Destiny's arm, holding on like a child clings to safety in a storm. Seconds felt like hours until the room finally stilled with the three men pinned against the floor, the diner filled with the sharp sound of handcuffs clicking and the heavy breaths of frightened customers. When it was over, Adanna lifted her head, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Destiny, who was bruised, shaken, but still standing like a warrior, and she whispered through sobs, "You saved me, you saved my life." Destiny smiled weakly, brushing dust from her apron, and whispered back, "No ma'am, you saved yourself by trusting me." The diner slowly returned to silence as the police led the three men out in handcuffs, their angry shouts fading into the night, leaving behind broken chairs, spilled drinks, and the shaken hearts of everyone inside. Adanna sat frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. The candle on her cake had burned down to a small puddle of wax, yet somehow it was still alive, flickering stubbornly against the shadows. Destiny slid into the booth across from her, her breathing heavy, her uniform stained from the scuffle, and her hands still trembling. Adanna stared at her through tear-filled eyes, her voice breaking into pieces. "Why would you do that for me? You could have been killed." Destiny held her gaze, her brown eyes warm and steady despite the bruise forming on her arm. "Because ma'am, I could not stand by and watch evil win tonight. You were sitting here all alone on your birthday, and nobody should have to die alone in the dark." Adanna covered her mouth with her hand, trying to stop the sob that rose from her chest. She had fought so hard to be strong, to be untouchable in business and in life, but tonight the walls around her heart cracked and she let the tears fall. She whispered, "I have billions in the bank, but not one person who called me today, not one friend, not one family member, and yet you, a stranger, risked everything for me." Destiny reached across the table, placing her calloused hand gently over Adanna's jeweled fingers. Her touch was soft, yet full of strength. "Ma'am, my grandmother always told me that love is the only thing that makes life worth living," she said. "Money and power come and go, but kindness lives forever. Tonight, God gave me the chance to show kindness, and I am glad I listened." Adanna shook her head in wonder, staring at the young woman who had done what none of her business partners, lovers, or so-called friends had ever done. She had put Adanna's life before her own. She whispered, "You are braver than anyone I have ever met. Tell me your name again, child." "Destiny." "Adeyemi," she replied proudly, "a student nurse trying to finish school and care for my sick grandmother. I work Nights here and weekends cleaning offices to pay for her medicine. Adanna's heart clenched hearing the quiet dignity in her words. She saw not just a waitress, but a fighter, a dreamer, and a guardian angel. She whispered, "Destiny, Adi me you saved my life, but more than that you reminded me what life means." Destiny smiled gently, shaking her head. "You will be fine now, ma'am, the police will protect you." But Adanna shook her head firmly. "No, Destiny, from now on. I do not want to face another birthday alone. I want to know people like you, people who are real, people who care." She reached across the table, gripping Destiny's hand with surprising strength. And she whispered, "Tonight, you gave me the greatest gift, not survival but hope, and I will not waste it." Destiny's eyes glistened with tears as she whispered back, "Then, let us make a promise, ma'am, no more lonely birthdays, and no more hopeless nights. We will walk together from now on." Adanna smiled through her tears and nodded, sealing a bond that was stronger than money, stronger than fear, bond that would change both their lives forever. Adanna could not sleep that night when she finally returned to her mansion, because the images of the diner, the candle, the gun, and Destiny's brave face would not leave her mind. She walked through her marble halls and gold-furnished rooms, but everything felt emptier than ever. The silence echoed louder than the noise of the city outside. She sat at her long dining table, staring at the seats that had never been filled with friends or family, and her heart ached. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her contacts, but saw only names of business partners, lawyers, and journalists. No one she could call just to talk, no one who cared about her soul. She thought of Destiny's warm hand on hers, and her grandmother's saying that kindness lives forever. Adanna made a decision. She would not return to this cold, empty life without reaching for something more. The next morning, she dressed simply in jeans and a plain blouse and drove herself without her driver to the small apartment Destiny had written on a napkin before they parted ways. Adanna knocked gently and was greeted by an elderly woman with a smile that lit up the tiny hallway. "Ma'am, you must be Adanna," she said in a voice filled with warmth. "Welcome, I am Mama Fola, Destiny's grandmother. Please come in." The apartment was small, with old furniture and peeling paint, but it felt alive with love photos of family lined the walls. A pot of stew simmered on the stove, and gospel music played softly in the background. Destiny appeared, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw Adanna standing there, holding a bag of groceries. Adanna smiled shyly. "I thought you might let me visit." Destiny's face softened, and she nodded. "Come in, ma'am. Please, you are always welcome." Adanna stepped inside and felt more at home in that humble space than in her own mansion. She sat with Mama Fola, who told her stories of Nigeria, of hardship and hope, and of raising Destiny after her parents passed away. Adanna listened with tears in her eyes, feeling like she had found a missing piece of herself. Destiny poured tea and said softly, "This is our life, ma'am. It is not rich in money, but it is rich in love." Adanna held the cup with trembling hands, whispering, "Then this is what I have been missing all along." Over the weeks, Adanna returned often to the small apartment, sometimes bringing food, sometimes bringing medicine for Mama Fola, and sometimes bringing nothing but herself to sit, laugh, and learn. She discovered that true wealth was not in the billions stored in her bank accounts, but in the warmth of a shared meal, the sound of laughter in a tiny room, and the strength of love that asked for nothing in return. One evening, as they ate jollof rice together, Adanna said, "Destiny, tell me your dream. Not just about nursing school, but about your heart. What do you want for your life?" Destiny paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth, her eyes shining. "I want to heal people. I want to touch lives like my grandmother touched mine. I want to open a clinic for the poor, so no child will cry because their parents cannot afford medicine." Adanna felt her throat tighten with emotion. She whispered, "Then we will make that dream come true." Destiny frowned slightly, shaking her head. "Ma'am, I do not ask for money. I only ask for prayers and strength." Adanna reached across the table, gripping her hand firmly. "No, Destiny, I am not offering money. I am offering partnership. I will walk this road with you. We will build this dream together, because I need it as much as you do." Destiny's eyes filled with tears as she whispered softly, Then let us build it together. Mam and Mama Fola clapped her hands with joy, proclaiming, God has joined you two for a reason. From that day on, Adanna poured her heart and her wealth into Destiny's dream, but more importantly, she poured her time. She sat beside Destiny as she studied late at night. She attended church with them on Sundays. She cooked stew with Mama Fola, laughing as she spilled spices. She began to feel alive, not as a billionaire, but as a sister and a daughter and a friend. She whispered to herself often, perhaps this is the birthday gift God gave me the night Destiny whispered those words that saved my life. 2 years passed and the bond between them grew stronger than blood. Destiny graduated from nursing school with the highest honors, and Adanna was there in the front row, clapping louder than anyone, her eyes shining with tears as Destiny walked across the stage, her braids bouncing, her smile wide, and her future bright. Mama Fola sat beside her, singing praises to God and waving her scarf with joy. After the ceremony, Adanna embraced Destiny, tightly whispering, I am so proud of you, my sister. Because by now Adanna no longer saw her as a waitress or even just a friend. She saw her as family. Together, they opened the Ademi Okafor Clinic in Lagos, a place where the poor could receive treatment without fear of cost. Children laughed in the waiting room, women found hope in the doctor's eyes, and old men thanked God for medicine that saved their lives. Every wall of the clinic carried photos of patients and families touched by kindness, and in the center hung a framed picture of Adanna and Destiny at Mama Rosa's diner, smiling with the words underneath it, courage, kindness, hope. People came from all over to see not just the billionaire who had built empires, but the nurse who had risked her life to save a stranger there. Stories spread across Nigeria and beyond, inspiring others to believe in kindness above all else. Adanna's company, Whitfield Technologies, thrived, but she no longer cared about magazine covers or awards. She cared about the laughter in the clinic halls and the joy in Destiny's eyes every time they healed another soul. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Adanna sat outside the clinic with Destiny, watching the children play nearby. She whispered, you gave me life, Destiny. Not just that night in the diner, but every day since you gave me purpose. Destiny smiled softly, her hand squeezing Adanna's. No, sister, you gave me wings. Together, we gave each other what we were missing. Years later, Adanna's life was no longer defined by loneliness and emptiness, but by love, laughter, and legacy. On her 40th birthday, she did not sit alone in a corner booth with a candle flickering. She sat at Mama Rosa's diner again, this time with Destiny by her side, Mama Fola smiling beside them, and dozens of children from the clinic singing happy birthday. The cake was larger, but the candle was the same, a single flame burning bright. Adanna closed her eyes, making a wish not for money or success, but for courage to keep giving, love to keep shining light, and for Destiny's friendship to remain forever. When she opened her eyes, Destiny leaned close and whispered the same words she had spoken a decade earlier, keep eating and do not look. But this time she smiled wide and added, not at danger, but at the past, because the future is brighter than you ever dreamed. Adanna laughed through tears, hugging her tightly and whispering, thank you, my angel, you saved me then. You keep saving me now. The customers clapped, the children cheered, and Mama Rosa herself wiped tears from her eyes, for she remembered that night long ago when fear had nearly stolen 2 lives, but kindness had changed the story forever. Adanna knew now that wealth was not in billions but in bonds, not in diamonds but in devotion, not in mansions but in memories. She had built an empire of love with Destiny, and that empire would never crumble as the candle flame flickered against her smile. Adanna whispered softly to herself, sometimes life changes with a whisper, sometimes angels wear aprons, and sometimes the greatest treasure you will ever find is the heart of someone who chose to stand beside you when the world turned dark.